First of all, I think your analysis was very straight line. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing frogs.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got that.
Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
the
an
Chinese critic.
erratic
Mikhail
detective
Rodriguez.
is Mikhail Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? No, Gildarie, you deal with that. You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Gildarie, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that.
Hi, good evening and welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. Wherever you are, good night, good morning. I hope that you're staying safe. If you're on the roadways, remember to stay safe. Saw a horrific accident yesterday. Somebody, a motorcyclist, overtook a vehicle and slammed straight into a truck. It was very fiery and ended up in the death of that individual. Very well-known person in Berbice. And again, we say we have to shake our head. What a waste of life. What bad decisions could do and how much it could devastate our families and friends and loved ones. We continue to do the wrong thing in this country because we make bad decisions. Tonight, we're going to have a very interesting guest, somebody who has a very long experience in politics, in agriculture, in local government, and in a very short while, my co-host Freddie Kissoon is going to say goodnight to you, and he's also going to do the honors of introducing this man. No stranger to the Guyanese public, but also has a very long institutional experience and impact, especially on farmers, rice farmers, that is. In this country, and we have to discuss that because while we've been hearing about oil and sugar, rice is an interesting crop that within recent years we see it in and out, but on the world stage, India has restricted exports of certain varieties of rice. That is because they want to protect the local market. What does that mean for countries like Guyana, which export a lot of rice? On the local scene also, we would have seen this before I hand over to Freddie. I get upset, and every time I see this, too many fires in this country, too many deaths in those fires. Yet another one has, I think, over on the west coast or somewhere across there. Body found in the what would be the remains of a fire, what appear to be the remains of a natural or a normal fire, and that person, there's some rumors going wrong. It could be arson. Whatever is the case, we've seen too many instances of that. Too many fires, too many deaths in fires. We got to start having these kind of conversation because it raises issues. Or raises the issue of safety in our homes when it comes to wiring, when it comes to checking those wires in a periodical, on a frequent basis. And maybe you'd have to get a fire chief sometime in here to talk about what should be the norm. How should we go about doing that? Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my co-host Freddie Kissoon, who's going to do the honors of introducing our guest tonight.
Thank you, Leonard. Thanks for watching us. We're in a 15th month of this program, and forgive me for my chauvinism. I think we have brought a little bit of history to light, and we have added to the historiography of Guyana. I have the pleasure of introducing for the second time a long-standing friend of mine. I have known him more than 35 years. So that means I've known him when I was young, and he was even younger. One of the stalwarts of the People's Progressive Party that has been around the People's Progressive Party for a very long time. If he sits in Parliament for 13 years, if I've known him as a General Secretary of the RPA for 10 years, and he would have been in the PPP before he acquired those designations, then he's been around a long time. He is a member of parliament, and he's the advisor to the Minister of Local Government, but he's not here in that capacity. We invited him to expatiate, expound, and elaborate on the political experience he has had growing up in the PPP, his experience of living through certain traumas in this country, the 70s elections, the 80s elections, Buxton, 202, 206, the 2020 election. Dharam Kumar Siraj, although I've known him for 35 years, I've never called him, and I said that in the previous program, I've never called him Dharam or Kumar. I've always called him Siraj. Now, for me, that is like his first name. It's like I've known my co-host, Gildarie, for 20 years. And I don't think I've hardly called him Leonard. I pick up the phone, hey, Gildarie. So I've called Dharam Kumar Siraj for the past 35 years. Siraj. Now with a vacancy, a ministerial vacancy in the Ministry of Local Government, when I think about it, honestly, I'm not batting for him, but I don't think there's anyone in this country that knows more about rice than Dharam Kumar Siraj. So with that long introduction, when he comes on the screen, look at the color of his jacket, and you will see which country, which party he bats for, and which party he is married to. Siraj, nice to be here. The last time you were here, it was with Malcolm Harry Paul. Let me tell the viewers, Malcolm said at 5:30 he picked up a virus, so he wants to be safe and not be in the studio. So I guess you know someone is just as famous as you.
I'm not sure. How you come up with these? How are you two different words, and I believe they mean the same?
Well, someone is not as infamous as you. But before we get into the question,
it's a magician's jacket.
This is you wore this thing to represent your party.
That is correct. I'm a proud member of the People's Progressive Party.
A real stalwart, man.
Yeah, a real stalwart. You know.
You're one of the longest serving PPP as a youth man. You were in the PPP, as we say in common parlance. As a youth man, you were in the PPP.
As a youth man, I've been with the PPP in my school days.
Cut his blood and see what you got to,
under the stewardship of Udin Ishmael at Baijival Secondary Multilateral School. So our activism started at Baijival School at my career. When I joined Baijival School, the now Vice President, former President Barajade was also at that school. He was in the 5th form when I joined in the 1st form. So we were all active in PYO politics under Udin Ishmael at that school. So I was born in the PPP. My father was a member of the local authority council. He was a woodcutter, he was a cane cutter, he was a farmer, he was a councillor. And later on, after the government change in '92, he became the tractor driver for the NDC, moving fuel up and down the East Coast to those pump stations in Cane Grove at that age. But he cut cane to send us to school. And, you know, we grew up in renting homes, but he made a choice. between the education of his 9 children and getting a home. And he chose to educate his children them. We lived in renting house until we all got big, and then we now have our own homes, and there was only one sibling inside. So my father made a conscious choice to put us through school at the expense of us living in rented property.
If Gildarie, lend me a penknife. I know when we cut you, PPP.
What do you want to cut the knife
PPP
for?
say, I want to see what else going to run out his blood, because there's a second thing that's going to run out of his blood. Rice. He's been in the rice industry a long time.
Right.
Anybody knows about the rice industry, maybe the entrepreneurs that are inside there. But you would say that you know as much about rice as them.
I have a decent knowledge of it, almost 4 decades of rice knowledge. I joined the RP in 1989 at the Rice Producers Association as a rice extension officer, working under the stewardship of Pariak Sukai. I was General Secretary then, and Fazal Ali, a good friend of yours.
Yeah, one of my favorite PPP persons.
Yes, was Assistant General Secretary. And I started working with the RPA then in 1989. And after the government changed, Pariak Sukai became chairman of the RDC Region 3. Fazal Ali became General Secretary, and I moved up as Assistant General Secretary. And I've been working with the RP until recently, until August 2020. I still maintain the General Secretary position as a advisor to the council there, and you know, I've had significant amount of my formative age in the rice sector as a servant to the sector. And I grew up as a farmer in Cane Grove, other crops, some amount of livestock, small amount of rice. So my entire life has been in that sector.
Are we good? If not Minister of Local Government, we may have a Minister of State within the Minister of Agriculture. Well, I'm sure that's coming up.
You don't talk about that.
But one thing I want to say, and I said this on the program when you were here about a year ago, if there is any person in politics, Gildarie, any person in politics that you can count on them to be modest and unassuming, is that Kumar Siraj. I think even if you become a minister, I think worldwide you probably want to be one of the simplest ministers around. I always admire that quality in you. Always.
Well, I grew up like that. My teachings have been with that, like that, on the Pariag, on the Chedi Jagan, we served there. When I joined the RP in 1989, I've already had 6 years of PPP under my belt. And, Chedi was a simple man. And my family, all my family, my parents, they're simple people. And, my mother is still alive. She's 81 years old now.
She's in Eccles with you?
No. She's with my eldest sister in the US.
Oh, okay.
She wants me to go there. About a dozen years ago, she put in the papers. I asked my children what to do, and they said they want to live in Guyana. So I never followed up. And she's been on my case. Every time I call her for her birthday, she would say, "But Ramesh, that's my calling. When are you going to complete the filing of the paperwork and all of that?" And I said, "Okay, I'll work on it. And it gives me particular joy to relate with the people who I represent. And whilst I have never really found it attractive to be, a big shot, as we would say, in local politics, I've always find it really rewarding to be, as you say, down to earth, rub shoulders with the ordinary person, talk with them. And I think I've, over the years, managed to gain the ability to be there and also at other levels. And I've served also at all different levels. I've been a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the ACP-EU and a member of the Joint Parliamentary Assembly. I've rubbed shoulders with MP in the entire African, Caribbean, and Pacific regions. They were joining in this course at the EU members of parliament level. I've been a member of the joint task force that was looking at the economic partnership agreement. I work closely with Patrick Gomes, who was our Secretary General.
Yeah, P.I. Gomes.
Yes, in of the ACP, our ambassador. Yes. So I've shared a table with some professor at the UWI during this course, and so I've managed, I said, to straddle those gaps between being an ordinary person talking at the bottom house and being up there and taking place in debate. And I think I've done a reasonable good job in the parliament over the past 13 years during the debates on the budget and during debates on different matters. My last contribution was the debate on, I think, this bill that has to do with, I think we piloted a bill that has to do with wholesale and retail businesses. So that was my last participation in the parliament. I had prepared some notes to contribute to the rise in the debt ceiling because finance minister or minister within the ministry of office of the president with responsibility of finance, you got to be politically correct sometimes. He had piloted that bill for the increase in the debt ceiling. And of course, the PNC was arguing against it. And I had prepared some notes to speak to that because, all over the world, countries developed on debt, on borrowing. And even when I built my house in Eccles, in 1998, 1999, I did that with borrowing from the New Building Society, because if I was to wait on the savings on salary, my children would have grown up in a rented home also. So I think that, contribution to that, Guyana now is credit worthy and can borrow against income, current and expected or projected income. And we should not have to wait for a lifetime, for example, to have a 4-lane bridge across the Demerara River. We should not have, or the people of Linden should not have to wait a lifetime for a bridge across the Demerara River at Linden. That's continued to be a single-lane bridge. That bridge is decades old. I mean, that bridge was there when there were 2 or 3 cars in Linden. Now every home has a car. We cannot continue that. And should we ask people to wait a lifetime for that? No. And at the current rate we are earning, we will not be able to deliver on these projects. And if we have the ability to borrow and make people's life better, to improve on the transportation network, on the agriculture infrastructure, on our sea defenses and river defenses, then that is what we must do. We cannot become the Dubai of the Caribbean if we only do our development or base our development based on revenues. It will not happen in our lifetime. So that is the argument I was taking there to talk and listen. Whilst you might not like that, this is the reality. Look at the United States. The United States,
China.
Yeah, the United States per capita debt is over $90,000 per person. All of us admire the US, and a lot of us want to go there. And we want Guyana to become like the United States of America, or Canada, or European state, for example. But we also have to know that to get there, you have to make investment based on your revenues, current and projected. Our current per capita debt ratio is just under $5,000. Now you compare that to over $94,000 per capita debt burden on the US, and it's about 18 times more. So we can borrow, we are borrowing to make people's life better. And we are in a very strong position to do that. We're credit worthy. Every lending institution is falling over themselves to lend to Guyana. It got to be responsible, and we have to execute projects based on feasibility and based on demands. You know how many man hours you lose every day at the Demerara Harbor Bridge? Thousands of man hours every single day. If that bridge closed for 30 minutes, you see hundreds of cars on both sides, and people sitting there waiting to go about and do their work. Every man hour you put it down there is a $500 loss, and you can pay back for that, So those are some of the points.
Before Gildarie come in, you didn't blemish your political career by still owing NBC. You paid off the people?
I pay them off, and I think I'm going
NBC?
and new buildings. NBS. No, I think it's good to borrow because I am.
So if you become a politician, you can wear NBS?
No,
why
are we still owe the people?
I pay them. I have my file. I have an open file there, and they said you're one of our better customers.
So
we want you to come back. So when I want to do an upgrade, I'll go back there to the New Building Society, or who knows, I might go to GBTI. The first bank I joined when I started earning wages was GBTI. At that time, we were at Gimpex Building on Regent Street. And GBTI had just opened their branch in Regent Street. You know, Gildarie was a little boy then, across the road. So we went across and open. So I might as well open, I might take a loan from them to do some...
Let's talk rice.
And expansion.
I remember at Kaiser News, I would have been covering a lot of the RPAs and the Ministry of Agriculture. It was a big thing then because agriculture was one of the main front runners. I think if you were to ask me some of the most difficult people to deal with, I love them a lot, are the rice farmers. Freddie Kissoon, there's nothing that you could do that is going to please those people. They always got a problem with drainage and next door neighbor and so on. Rice prices, the rainfall, too much sunshine, it's always a problem. I want to ask you if now is a good time, especially with the problem that we have with labor, for somebody to get into rice, and if they've grown up in rice, what is it that they're doing wrong? Because we've done rice the traditional way, and we know there are some more scientific things. Let's talk in context of that.
Right. So to answer your last question, first I would say any time is a good time to get into rice, and I say this because the demand for rice is projected to increase at a rate of 1.5% per annum. And you're talking millions of tons of rice. And as you said in your opening remarks, India has now restricted the export of non-scented rice or aromatic rice. So all the basmati rice can be exported, but the regular rice they're keeping because of their production level, and they need to keep their consumers happy also, than to avoid spike in prices internally. Now that is going to create some problems on the global market because India is a major player.
Right.
They export about 10 million tons of rice, right? So that is going to be an issue. So rice, because leaving out that, because the global demand is increasing at a rate of 1.5% per annum, there will always be demand for rice. Now, you got to do it the right way, the profitable way. And over the years, we have moved away from the traditional way of cultivating rice into a more scientific approach. So our farmers of tomorrow are going to be the people with their first degree and their second degree in agriculture. They're very well educated. Some of our existing farmers who would have barely completed primary school, I would, if I had the power and the authority, willingly, without any hesitation, give them their first degree in agriculture. A man who could barely write. But because he's been in the business of planting rice and making the more educated people look like fools in there, they deserve also recognition for that kind of knowledge that they represent. So not all knowledge are academic. So yes, that's a good time. Now, with the labor market is an issue that we need to address. It's not only affecting the agriculture sector, it's also affecting the construction sector, it's approaching the industries, manufacturing, and construction. I waited 9 months to get a painter to paint my house. I had to move from one to the other, simply because he's so tied down, and he complains to me, he said, man, see Raj, I turned out with 9 people Monday, by Wednesday I'm down to 6. By Friday, I'm down to 3. Next day, Monday, turn out 2 of them. So that kind of issues. And the labor market is very volatile. And if labor is moving from low earning jobs to high earning jobs, you cannot blame them. You just have to find a solution to the problem. In the agriculture sector, mechanization is one of the areas that we can move into. Now, take application of agrochemicals, for example. We do that using manual labor with a motor blower, a mist blower. Now, the application of chemicals can be done with aircraft.
I think they're using drones and so on.
We're using the aircraft. Now the farmers, because of limited landing strips in Guyana, and this is an issue that I've raised with the Attorney General, we have raised with the Minister of Agriculture, because under the current legislation, flying any aircraft falls under the same regulation that govern the flying of commercial aircrafts, which is passenger aircraft. So if I'm operating a crop duster, I have to follow the same rules and regulation that applies to an aircraft moving passengers around legally.
So we're behind the times.
So that's a humbug right away, right? Look,
That should have been corrected a long time ago.
right. So they're working now to correct the legislation, and then we have to get more airstrip. Nigeria across the river, the Quarantine River, they do 1/3 of the rice that we do. They have 18 airstrips, right, with about 14 or 15 aircrafts, crop dusters that service the 22,000 hectares.
It's
just across the river.
Right,
Just one
Gildarie,
river.
across the river.
You realize how it's important to listen to this?
Yeah.
These things that come out, I didn't know about that.
Right,
I
so-
spent all my life in, I don't know about that. Across Nigeria, so much airstrips.
18 airstrips they have.
Well, let me.
These are landing strips for crop dusters. You cannot land a Boeing 747 there, you know.
Yes,
Or
for
passenger
crop duster.
aircraft. These are for crop dusters.
yes.
I hope we don't even have 8.
We have, leaving out Gaisuko, we have about 4. Right? That are dedicated to this kind of.
I think they were engaged in ASL, Air Services Limited, to do some work.
Air Services Limited is providing some services in Region 5. They currently have a lease arrangement with the government to utilize the airstrip at Burma. They're building another one. But the legislation also dictates the distance between airstrip. And that legislation, like I said, provides for commercial operations, not for these crop dusters. So like how you have Ogle X amount of miles from Chedijagan International Airport, right? You cannot have another one with close vicinity, right? Like at what you can have. But now, what Nigeria has done is update their legislation to provide now for agriculture equipment, right? Like these crop dusters and drones. For you, in order for you to operate a drone, you got to get permission from the Civil Aviation Department. Right now, this is a crop duster flying maximum 20 feet. You're not going to be in the flight path of any aircraft.
The thing is,
but legally, you got to get that clearance. Right.
That Gildarie, so many times we sat down here and hear some revelations that are unbelievable. Siraj, you've been in this thing a long time, so it may be not shocking to you, but I'm sure I can speak for Gildarie. We need to go into the future, man.
We need to, and that is why we have to harness technology to address cost of production, to address the depletion and continued depletion of labor forces, and to enhance our quality. Now, take paddy bog control, for example. The paddy bog is the #1 economic pest to the rice industry. Damages by paddy bog can take 15% of your profit per crop. That's a huge amount of money. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars there, right? Now, the paddy bog is active at night. That is why you need to spray early in the morning or late in the evening. Now, if you spray during the day, you will have to use some kind of systematic chemical. So when the bug comes to feed, it gets infected with this poison and it dies. Now, if you could apply chemical at night when these bugs are active, you don't need a systematic chemical. All you need is a contact chemical. So the plant is in no way affected. Nothing is going into the plant itself, the plant tissues, and so there's absolutely no danger. It's a contact chemical. Now with drones using the GPS, Global Positioning System, using satellites, you can program a drone to spray only this room. That's how precise they can be.
I know, I'm familiar with
Now this field, you have this field, you can program it. No person wants to go in a rice field to spray in the night. There's associated dangers and so on. Right. So you want to, now you can be in the back of your pickup truck and you can have a drone spraying there in the night in your field. Remotely controlled and killing paddy bugs. Right? that are active in the night. Now, to do that, you need special approval from CD. You can't do it. So we're pushing for a change in the legislation to allow.
So to do that, you need permission from the Civil Aviation.
That's correct. You cannot operate. That's what the law says. You cannot operate. The regulation says you cannot operate a drone just like that. Which raises a question, and this is just me cussing out a little.
Oh my!
You cannot have us going out in the future, and the policymakers are taking months and years to make things that are so critical to the
see what at my age I'm going to see that.
Yes, that's around the corner.
No, this matter. Somebody could have drafted out there.
The Minister of Agriculture has already spoken to the Attorney General. At the last sitting of the Parliament, when both gentlemen were standing together, I raised it with them. But the legislative agenda of the Attorney General Chamber is also very heavy.
Yes, that's fine.
Look, we started the last Parliament at 10 a.m. Wednesday morning, and we finished 8 a.m. Thursday morning, because we were pushing a lot of bills and new bills. A lot of these bills are arcane. So we have to bring them up to date. And that is what we have to do. Now, look at the demands of the international world on our legislative framework as it relates to money laundering, financing of terrorism, and all of that. So we have to upgrade our legislative framework to bring it up to par. You remember, Guyana was almost blacklisted. And if that had happened, all our banking transactions would have gone to zero, and this country would have been an island. And you cannot develop as an island. So the legislative agenda is heavy. I don't envy the Attorney General, Mr. Anil Nandalal, the amount of work that they got to do to bring up these laws up to date. And I think he has the record in terms, I think 22 new pieces of legislation within a 1 month period, a 1 year period. It was never done before, right? I think that was the number. So, and we need to do many more of that per year to bring all these old pieces of legislation to meet the contemporary needs of our nation and as we interact regionally and internationally.
I want to ask you a question, MP. We talk about all these fancy legislations and these updated legislation, which are supposed to be on par with the rest of the world. But you were also talking there, or we were also talking about the change of a culture of the people.
Very important.
I want to ask you directly, because you have a hands-on through the RPA as well as the advisor of the Minister of Local Government. How ready, because this is one of the problems we're getting, how ready are the people of Guyana to embrace the changes, whether it is dealing with oil or technology? And technology with regards to agriculture and the oil, the benefits that come from oil, and demands that come from the industry as well.
I think we're getting ready in terms of the oil and gas sector. We're an infant.
People are getting the message.
Yeah, we're an infant basically. So, and that is why we need the local content legislation is very important. And the nature of the local content legislation provides for a certain amount of foreign expertise as we build local expertise. A lot of people are unhappy with the legislation, but they did not understand that in the context of Guyana not having expertise, we cannot impose on a foreign company a 90% complement of staff when you don't have the people to give them.
That's right.
The whole oil and gas industry would have grind to a halt. So the local content legislation started out with what we have available as we seek to train people to fill those things. And then the legislation can be amended to provide for an increasing percentage of your workforce to be local. But you can't tell a man 90% of your workforce must be local and you don't have them. Nobody will come. So that's an important point that we have to. Now, in terms of the agriculture sector, I think our farmers, let me use the planting of new varieties, for example, are ahead of us. They've been experimenting, they've been importing, they've been working with some millers, and they've had what we classified. I'm the chairman of the Rice Research and Extension Subcommittee of the GRDB. We have had issues with some varieties we could not identify. And we put them down as other variety until we learned that there were some varieties coming in from Brazil.
Is that illegal?
It's illegal you ought not to do it, and until the government made it legal. So now it's being done the right way. Now the farmers have embraced a technology that we as researchers and scientists have not put on the table as yet. I made that comment to tell you that in this particular sector, the farmers are up to date and in some instances ahead of us in terms of the appreciation of the technology and new varieties. Right now, the president of the RPA, he has a drone sitting at Miami Airport. A big drone that he bought, thinking you could bring it in here and you could go and make application on his field of chemical and fertilizer. But there are so many regulations governing the input, not first of all the export of a drone and then the importation of a drone. So his problems is on the export side because the US officials there are not allowing him to bring it out because of concerns, of course, that you could put a bomb on a drone and direct it to Freddie Kissoon, for example. Right?
So they're stopping the drone.
You just can't think it has a lot of applications if you're not responsible.
It's like you can't drive a vehicle here legally without insurance, fitness, and license.
You expect these
no, you don't understand. It's a security issue. You just cannot put that in.
But it's also an issue. It's also an instrument of development.
It is. There's no argument to that. But how you at the airport, that man doesn't know that currency, right?
You the knowledgeable person. We had a guest here. We had a guest here who is very big in the area of Caribbean business in the US, a business executive. And he told us about how they seized the lady Hassa in New York. They go into the man place and seize his mosquito coil, charge him. You cannot, third world countries cannot grow if you have these kinds of impediment to their growth. That is why I think we should shift to countries like Brazil, China, Pakistan, and other countries where you could import a drone for your business, for your country to develop. The United States.
Let me drop parallel to you, Freddie Kissoon. You need, for the farmers, you know, if you look at the number of people who've been charged with guns, illegal guns, you're going to find that it's mostly in the Amazon, in those outlying areas, riverine areas, and so on. You ask them, almost every other person got a gun there, and it's probably illegal. And for them, it's an everyday way of life. Those are things that is with them. Now, there's no argument that a drone is going to be thing, but imagine that you bring in that to the airport. I could not bring through my drone to the airport like that. I had to get an okay from GCAA. I have a drone.
And yours, of course, was a small one.
It's a very small one. It's a DJI thing. So the issue with that is that you have to follow You can't bring a gun from the United States all the way to the license. It's the same thing.
It's not the same.
No, there is a same thing.
A gun is not needed for the economic development.
You know what
of
you could do with a drone? No, do you know what you could do with a drone?
But Gildarie, you know what you can do as a human?
No,
you know what you could do with a car? If you stretch that argument, third world countries would not be able to import anything.
But you cannot.
You know what you
cannot expect a drone to a car.
Hold on. You say you know. The argument is context. If you argue that you could put a bomb on a drone, you could take the logic, not the specificity or particularity of the drone. You can take that argument to anything at all. So you can put a bomb.
Bring in a helicopter or airplane into this country just like that.
You know what the point you're missing? The point you're missing, which is what Wesley Curtin said here, is that United States could be a very difficult place. No, I am saying that we don't have to put up with those kinds of mentalities of the
US. Those drones are this big. It is this big.
So you really think the US? You really think the man can't bring in the RPA can't bring in a drone to Guyana? You know how many like that, drones like that, are going to Israel for agricultural purposes?
But
They
there's a-
hustle selected third world
No,
countries.
they're not saying that they're saying that, but there's a procedure to follow.
No, you're
he made
missing
it
the
very-
point.
No,
The
but did
point-
you hear what
you're
he said?
missing the point.
The president of the RPA landed there. He didn't know that you had to go through those
You know
procedures.
something? You know something?
Uh-huh.
That very drone, for agricultural purposes, the Chinese understand that.
No, but
The
it's
Indonesians,
arguing how
the
good it
Brazilians
is.
understand that. Why did he go and buy a drone in the US? Buy the thing from Brazil. Buy the thing
Well,
from
maybe
China.
that's a way, but the people has a
That is
regulation,
why-
and there's a reason why they have the
Right.
regulation.
No, but you're
Also,
missing the
Fred,
point. The
you want
regulation
to-
is there to hassle third world countries.
That's your opinion.
You're missing.
It's also there
you're
to protect
missing.
you.
You're missing the.
No, but,
they're also there to protect.
First, all right, but first of all, to Freddie, that when you're making an investment, you want the best possible product, equipment, machinery, or car that your money can buy, right? So you're going after the most sought of technology where reliability is concerned, productivity is concerned, and price, and you weigh that against the price. So you would do your reviews of the different online searches and check reviews and say, all right, instead of a DJI drone, I'm going for this other kind of drone and that kind of thing. So your research will inform you where to go and get it, right? So you would have opted for this type of drone that has excellent reviews based on its application in the agriculture sector. But they have some teething problems. Now, the issue you're raising, Freddie, that third world countries have always been facing some of these kind of restrictions. And you'll overcome them eventually. And that's when you move out of your third world status or developing and that sort of thing. It's not all the time things are going to be rosy and all of that. And sometimes you have barriers to trade, or what can be described as technical barriers to trade, specifically designed to hamper you to either to import or to export. And that is why it's called
That is what
technical-
happened when GATT was changed to WTO.
Right. So when you have these technical barriers to trade, you have to find ways of overcoming it. And you know, look at fuel use of fossil fuel, for example. The developed world became developed
Because
based
of fossil fuel.
fossil
Yeah.
fuel. Now suddenly you're finding that you know,
But it's
That's
damaging you.
right,
Right.
so you're going against that, and then so there are different aspects to development that you have to look at holistically, and every country is looking out for its own interests, and sometimes their interest lies parallel to yours. Sometimes it's conflicting. Sometimes it's complementary. Where it's complementary, you will move quickly. Where it's going to affect another country's interest, you're going to have problems with that. A developing Guyana is good for Guyanese. It might not necessarily be good for your neighbors, for example. Right? That's the nature of global politics. And, you know, I know you're very passionate about this subject of why third world countries continue to be underdeveloped or developing and all these constraints and so on. And, you know, sometimes the global agenda is against you. The global scheme of things is against you. And when we were negotiating economic partnership agreement, you know, and we were talking about subsidies, some of the most highest subsidies you can get.
I mean, the developed world
in North
EU,
America and in Europe.
EU, yeah.
But then they come to you now and they
tell
say
you,
the
right.
subsidy is in the blue box. So they now go into the fine print and tell you how you can give subsidy and where you can give subsidy. Take rice growing in Japan, for example, right? Japan cost of production is about 10 times Guyana's, right? But how they do it? Because they now give subsidy to the farmers to allow them to preserve the hillside from eroding. So you're paying the farmers to plant rice on a hillside because of degradation or anticipated erosion of that hillside if it is not planted. Similarly, in Europe, for example, they would put subsidies into an approved WTO box that can be defined as a blue box, and you do not have, as a developing countries, you do not have the money, the funds, or the development stage to allow for subsidies in that particular area. So you're basically left with industry or a sector that is not competitive because of subsidies.
And is this been deliberately done by the developed countries to stifle developing countries?
Well, the U.S. Farm Bill, for example, you have billions of dollars going to subsidy for farmers, wheat, rice, and corn farmers.
And we can do that.
And that subsidy is going there under the U.S. Farm Bill legislation because of the need of the United States itself to be self-sufficient in food and to export. But we can compete anytime with the U.S. in terms if the removal of subsidies or support to their rice farmers. We could put rice in Arkansas cheaper than they produce it there, right? That is what we can do. But with the subsidy, they're doing the opposite. They can bring it into you. Look what they did in Haiti, for example, under the Food for the Poor program. They sent in rice in there. A striving Haitian rice industry was destroyed because of free rice, right? We are unfortunately we got the PL 480 aid here in terms of wheat, in flour, because we do not produce wheat, right? So there are different ways that they find to send stuff.
There are 3 countries that huge, big, 2 are almost. One is superpower, one is need to become a superpower, the other is a global power. Superpower China, almost superpower India, global power Brazil. We need now, and that is why you have BRICS. That's why BRICS have been extended. You see, the more third world go into these developed third world countries, have relation with them, the more you cut out those kinds of restrictions, like the former Prime Minister Sam Hines was here, he's ambassador to
the US.
He said that we can't export catfish because he suspect the US is annoyed that it named catfish and they got a fish that is a part of American culture called catfish. You can't do a small country that, man. You can't. No, we can't export Gale back up. Guess what they do? They do the thing subtly. They didn't say we want your Gale back up. They can't do that. That's against WTA rules. So you know what they do? They said the net you're using to catch this Gale back up, it's harmful to turtles.
Well, that can be classified now as a technical barrier to trade.
That is why China has achieved that kind of penetration it has in the third world today, and the US is worried about it.
Yeah, but we have our fishing sector a decade ago started, or more than a decade ago, started to use what is called a TED, turtle excluded devices, right? So that's not a problem anymore. They raise some other issues that has to do with catfish importation into US and all of that. Hopefully we'll get over that. In commercial quantities, you can still pack a 10-pound in your suitcase and take it for your families and so on. That will not affect trade. But what they have put the ban on is commercial trade in catfish from this country. And it is a technical barrier to trade. It's unfair, it's unreasonable, and you have to work your way around it. When you're a small country, first of all, you must have an appreciation to the size too. And in the global scheme of things, you got to be pragmatic too and realistically address some of the issues that you're faced with. Know whether you have the power to do certain things. And sometimes small countries, developing countries, third world countries, are forced to take an approach to aid their development, not necessarily an agenda that you want to implement, but an agenda that has to be modified for you to fit in with the global scheme of things. It's the reality that we're faced with. Some of the big countries have started to move away. You mentioned BRICS, for example, that combination of Brazil, Russia, China, and all of India and all of them. Now, these are huge countries, right? They have a support base. They have an economy, they have the population size, they have the development, they have the technology. The other day, India put something on the moon.
The southern side of the moon, which no other countries.
Right. So they're years ahead of us in terms of all of that. So they can flex their muscles, so to speak. as a third world country or developing country here in Guyana, we have to be careful how we flex our muscles.
We have to abide by the restrictions.
We have to be pragmatic, and we have to abide by how well we can negotiate those rough waters.
How are you going to overcome the restriction with this? So this is an RPA product that is sitting there in the US.
Well, it's a president of the RPA who's moving to embrace technology.
Yeah.
Like you said, Israel is doing it.
Yeah.
India is doing it.
So
China is doing it.
How are you going to get this?
The US is doing it. So he's moving. He got somebody there locally in Miami who is navigating his way around, getting
civil aviation,
all these paperwork.
Yeah.
No, the restriction is not on the import side. It's not on the Guyana side. Is on that side. They got to satisfy certain criteria. They're doing background check to ensure that Ramage is not a terrorist coming here for flights on bombing to Siraj House or something like that. So those kind of things. So the restriction is on the export side. We can deal with those kind of issues. So third world developing countries have to harness this technology, and you got to see how best you can bring it in, and that is why legislation is important. And that is why our country was nearly shut down when we were unable to pass legislation on a timely basis to address concerns of the global community as it relates to the financial legislation, money laundering, and more importantly, the financing of terrorism.
I looked at my Mango Pelton, time is going. I wanted to talk for you to relate to our viewers and so could be recorded in history some of the traumas you experienced growing up, the rig elections, those people getting killed in 73. But since you're a agri-man, a trade man, I want to get this across to our viewers. Do you know when GATT, General Agreement of Trade and Tariff, was changed into the WTO? That WTO thing ushered in globalization, and little Dominica, right, couldn't subsidize its banana anymore. It had to compete with Del Monte, which was growing banana at 10 billion times better than Dominica. And so what the WTO did, the rules did, that WTA rule, that when the WTA came, it killed Bristol. You know, we used to have a cigarette named Bristol, because I
used to represent the farmers who grew the tobacco to make Bristol.
So
in La Luni.
WTO is a piece of imperialism.
The World Trade Organization, as you said, was a little bit more progressive than GATT. Now, some third world countries that were former colonies, what they pushed for in the post-WTO era was economic partnership agreement.
Well, remember one year
that would have replaced
President Jagdeo refused to sign it? Yeah. Remember 1 year?
Now, President Jagdeo is knowledgeable about trade and all these issues and economic partnership. So you would not want to sign an agreement that will hinder your trade relations. You want to sign an agreement that is productive to your country and you will be able to enhance your trading capability. So when WTO came about, it was recognized that it was placing the small countries at a huge disadvantage against the big countries, especially former colonies of the colonial powers of Europe, whether it's France, the Great Britain, or Spain, or what have you. I think we had experience with all of them. Great Britain, the Dutch, the Spaniards.
German had colonies in Namibia.
So what those former colonies pushed for with the European Union was an economic partnership agreement that was less harsh in terms of conditionalities and to facilitate trade going into Europe. And the preferences we used to enjoy the preferences, but in keeping with some amount of commitment, those preferences, trade preferences, would have been eroded over a period of time. Take, for example, if our exporting of rice to Europe would attract a 35% duty or levy, third countries will have to pay 100%. So that gives us a bit of a competitive edge as part of economic partnership agreement. As part of those agreements also would have seen some support coming to the sugar sector, because now you're removing the preferential price when you would have raped the country through this sector of funds that were intended to modernize the sector. So in lieu of the fact that you move the riches away, you were now given a preferential trade arrangement under the economic partnership agreement to allow for the sector to grow. They did that for sugar, they did that for rice.
Yes.
Right. So that is to allow some amount of cushioning of the harshness in the WTO, the World Trade Organization. So a lot of the former colonies became partners, economic trade partners.
Yeah, that replaced the Lomé Convention.
Lomé Convention, Cotonou, and all of that. So you've had some of that and allows these countries to build their capacity. In banana exporting countries, you have niche market was found to them that was called fair trade, whereby some organizations in Europe would allow you to access these niche market at a higher price once you can prove that your production is organic.
But you know what was unfair with the WTO? It did away with subsidies. So they read the Riot Act to
It did away of direct subsidies that all of us could do, but they enhanced subsidies for their people under what is called the blue box, which is allowed.
So the WTO, in fact, was saying one type of global order is good for European farmers, but not for Caribbean farmers. And that
not only Caribbean, Latin America. Chiquita devastated banana production in Chile, in Ecuador, in these countries, because the small farmers now became laborers on the plantation owned by Chiquita, because they control the price structure. And if you look, if this is a banana, for example, and this banana is $1, and you dissect it, you see a farmer get 5 cents, right? The middleman get 20 cents. The retailer get 30 cents. And the consumer pay $1, but the farmer only get 5 cents, right? So in dissecting a lot of these products produced by third world countries, that's the scenario. And you don't have the size and the capacity to go into the market, and even to, if you go in at a low price, you don't have the strength to sustain a low price so as to compete with those people who will drop their prices on you. So that's another harsh reality that we're faced with. The big companies have the ability to sell below cost for 2 seasons. And when you're out of the market, they jack the price up 5 times to recover back that loss. Your pocket is not so deep, and you cannot do it.
When you saying that, what came into my mind when I was a student at the University of Toronto. I never forget what President Julius Nyerere of Tanzania said. He said 1 year we send 5 bags of coffee to the developed world, and that was equivalent of buying 1 car. Good. So we send 5 bags of coffee, we get 1 car. Then 2 years after, for the same car, it is 10 bags of coffee. You get in the same car, but 10 bags of... So the terms of trade keep changing against third world. And I would think BRICS may be one of the solutions to that.
Right. But, in the general scheme of things, sometimes it is better the devil you know than the one you don't know, right? So the BRICS came about, like I said. Now look at the composition of BRICS. They're all huge countries with huge economy. So if they come together, they can change the world order, right? We here in Guyana, we have to know our strength, know our weaknesses, know how to navigate the rough waters, know what is best for people, and how best to get it to them in the quickest possible time. Maybe down the road, BRICS is it. As it is now, that's not it.
Our operators...
I'm sorry being had to talk about your political...
Our operators indicated time is up. I've traveled to Brazil and to Suriname. And the minute that you step over, I think the Takatu River, and you go across the Contine River, you want to know what kind of different world it is. And you're closing to the people very quickly. I want to ask you, do you think that we're using the good examples those two countries or neighboring countries would have had? And what would you also say to the people of Guyana about the opportunities that exist currently about taking charge of that and about learning new experiences and grabbing those opportunities?
Well, outside of banana, our agriculture is way ahead of Suriname. Our rice, we support them with seeds and all of that. So in terms of rice, on agriculture general, we are ahead of them, except for bananas. I think they're out of banana now because of some of these unfair competition. So we are ahead. In terms of Brazil, given the sheer size of Brazil, Guyana has moved to establish a number of new agreements with Brazil, rightfully so, in the areas of agriculture trade, in the areas now of bringing in planting material that they would have already developed. We're working with them in terms of new varieties for rice that is resistant to a particular type of weed here, which we call red rice. It's one of the dominant. We cannot get rid of it easily because the weedicide to kill red rice will also kill the rice that you want to grow. Now, Brazil has developed a variety that is resistant to what particular type of weedicide that kills the red rice. Mm-hmm. So we can use that variety for a season or two, get rid of the red rice, and then go back to our variety, right? So we have developed relationship with Brazil. Above board, it's fully legalized and all of that in the areas of livestock. We're trading with them. Brazil is huge, right? Brazil has made tremendous amount of strides in the area of agriculture and livestock and trade also. So Guyana will do well, not to reinvent the wheel, but to establish partnership with Brazil. It's simply, you'll be lost in Brazil when you go and just look at the sheer size.
The soya farm.
Yeah, the soya farm, the rice farm, the livestock farm, the horse farm, the sheep, the goats, and all of that.
Unbelievable, and it's right next door.
Right, but so and their research facilities are excellent.
Yep.
Right, and on par with the developed world. So I think we are on the right track in terms of establishing relationship with Brazil in the area of agriculture and other areas of trade. And of course,
Freddie?
Gildarie, I think this is one of the better programs I have enjoyed simply because of the things I didn't know. And the things that I didn't know, I know now, and it's kind of depressing when he spoke about the need to have these airstrips, non-commercial airstrips, the need to use drones. When I was listening to him, it made me feel that we got so much more mountains to climb. And I hope I can see that in my lifetime.
You will see that. We have a lot to do.
What I'm more concerned about, or what's more concerning to me, is the speed in which our policymakers, and I got to hit both government and the technical people, well, I say the speed, the lack of speed in getting things done, because surely they're looking at what is happening in other countries, what is the industry norms, and if you know that the agricultural industry needs airstrips and so on, why aren't you moving with some kind of speed to get that done? In any case, last night had a very good game by the Guyana Amazon Warriors. I was extremely excited that I thought there should be a national holiday, but Freddie Kissoon disagreed. But coming back to Mr. Siraj, it is good. I hope that maybe you get a ministerial position. That's Gildarie saying so. I hope that they do it sooner or later. Here's a man that has a lot of institutional knowledge, not only in agriculture, but you could definitely hear him speak about the global situation, about trade, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And of course, go into areas, especially that is strongholds of the PPP, the farmers. He's been there talking to them, and it's good to have an in-depth knowledge, because as we move this country forward, if you don't have an idea what's happening on the ground, you're not going to be getting any kind of voters. You need to connect. And on the world stage, if you can be able to move the policies which are in line with what is happening on the world markets and so on, and we talk about WTO and a whole bunch of other stuff tonight, these things are very, very important if you want to move this country to the next level and the top level, because we are getting the money. but we need thinking and we need a kind of will to go about it. Please stay safe on the roadway. I want to say thank you very much to our guest, Member of Parliament, Dharam Kumar Siraj.
But let me push in for 30 seconds to say policies.
Sure.
Policy. Irfan Ali is very impatient as president, and I can tell you now that the speed that the government is moving with, the private sector is hard pressed to keep up in terms of development. And that's why you heard people talking about bringing in people to drive our development agenda. So we have to keep that in mind, Gildarie, that the government is very impatient to get things going. And only the other day I heard Jill talking to some contractors and said, and the president visited an area there a day ago. And he said, listen, you have good weather, move it 2 shifts, right? In the United States, people work in the night. Here I
don't understand.
They are here, down here.
You got deadlines to meet. You got to get it done.
Right. You have the good best weather. Why are you not working 2 shifts? So
it's a culture. It's a culture.
Right. So you have that problem. I think it's not the slot is not on the government side. The slot is on the country itself and the infrastructure that is in place. And you mentioned an interesting thing early on. We might bring in the technology. It's much more difficult to change the culture of the people.
They gotta accept it.
Right.
So ladies and gentlemen, interesting discussion tonight. We gotta have to have more of this, and it's gonna be a little technical at times. But guess what? We're learning, and I want to have more of this conversation. I think Freddie is intrigued, learned a lot of stuff. I've learned a lot of stuff too, because everything is connected. We are not a small country that is isolated on an island. We're connected to the rest of the world, and we have lots of lands. We have oil, we have gold, we have so many other things, and we have a shortage of labor. How do we get it right? What's the formula? We're going to be back with you on Friday. This is a Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. Good night to you. Stay safe on our roadways.